Hello and welcome. Today we're diving into something really powerful, a clear, actionable guide for helping your child reach their full potential. We've taken some incredible research and boiled it down into a simple blueprint. So let's get started.
So let's start with this number, 96%. What is that? Well, you can think of it as a metaphor for the vast, untapped potential that lives inside every child's brain. It's not about parts of the brain going unused, but about the incredible, almost limitless capacity for growth, for new connections, and for new skills. It's really the hopeful, optimistic idea that everything else we're going to talk about is built on.
And that leads us to this crucial idea. Intelligence isn't some fixed thing you're born with. It can absolutely be developed. A child's brain is just incredibly flexible, and things like their experiences, their environment, your guidance, they literally shape how that brain is wired. For any parent or educator, just understanding this one thing is a complete game changer.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We've laid out this explainer in 5 parts. We'll start with the foundation, your child's amazing brain. Then, we'll talk about building their thinking brain and their emotional brain. After that, we'll get into the superpower of play. And we'll wrap it all up with a practical toolkit you can start using right away. All right, first up, we've got to understand the incredible machine we're working with. Before we can talk about building anything, we need to appreciate the raw materials, the basic principles of how a child's brain actually grows and develops. Just think about the scale of this for a second. A newborn comes into the world with about 100 billion neurons. That's the hardware. But it's the early experiences, every hug, every story, every game that writes the software. The connections between those brain cells literally get stronger every time they're used. It's a use it or lose it system, which is exactly why a rich, stimulating environment isn't just a nice to have, it's absolutely critical. Okay, so we have this amazing hardware. But how does that turn into what we call intelligence? Well, in this section, we're going to see that being smart is way broader and more interesting than you might think. The big idea here is that there's not just one way to be smart. Researcher Howard Gardner identified these 7 different kinds of intelligence. A child might be a storyteller with incredible linguistic skills, or they might be a dancer who's a genius with their body. The point isn't to shove a kid into one box. It's to see their unique mix of strengths and help them grow in all these different areas. Being smart with words or numbers is great, but what about being smart with feelings? This next piece of the puzzle is just as important for a child's happiness and success down the road. Let's talk about the emotional brain. So, what is emotional intelligence, or EQ? Simply put, it's being smart about your feelings. It's the ability to know what you're feeling and why, to manage those big emotions, and to understand what other people are feeling too. That's empathy. And all of that helps you build good relationships and make better choices. But okay, that all sounds great in a textbook. Why does this actually matter? In the messy day-to-day reality of raising a kid, what does it really do for them? Well, here's the answer. A child with good EQ doesn't just have feelings, they can navigate them. So instead of getting totally overwhelmed by frustration with their homework or anger at their sibling, they actually have the tools to calm down, say what they need, and figure out a solution. This is what resilience looks like in real life.
So how do we actually build both the thinking brain and the emotional brain at the same time? Well, the answer is surprisingly simple, and it's incredibly powerful. It's what we could call the superpower of play. This quote says it all. We have to change how we think about play. It isn't just a break from learning, it is learning. It's the most important work of childhood. It's how kids test out their ideas about how the world works, how they practice social skills, how they develop physical coordination, and how they process their feelings. Play is learning in its purest, most natural form. And of course, play isn't one size fits all. It changes and grows right along with your child. In the early years, it's all about sensory stuff, things to touch and see and hear. By age 4, they're building entire worlds with blocks and trying on different characters. Later on, it gets more complex with strategy games like chess, team sports, or even science kits and coding. The trick is just to match the play to where they are developmentally.
All right, let's bring this all home. We've talked about the what and the why. Now it's time for the how. This is your practical toolkit, filled with strategies you can start using tonight. The dreaded tantrum, the moment that tests every parent. Here's a simple 3-step plan. First, stay calm. I know it's easier said than done, but your calm is contagious. Second, ignore the minor stuff. A lot of the time, they're just looking for a reaction, and any attention, even negative attention, just adds fuel to the fire. And third, and this is so important, wait until they're calm to talk about it. A brain that's flooded with emotion literally can't listen to reason.
Now, let's talk about two of the most fundamental tools for guiding behavior. Positive reinforcement is just a fancy way of saying catch them being good. When you see your child do something you like, sharing a toy, saying please, point it out, praise them for it. You're making it more likely they'll do it again. And extinction, which we just talked about with tantrums, is basically the strategic use of ignoring. For those minor annoyances, taking away your attention often makes the behavior just fade away.
Okay, let's fill up that toolkit with a few more powerful ideas. Make it normal to talk about feelings. Just giving them names. It sounds like you're feeling frustrated is huge. Create a special reading nook. It sends the message that reading is a fun, cozy thing to do. Use drawing as an outlet. Sometimes kids can draw what they can't say. Be consistent with consequences. That creates a safe, predictable world. And instead of just solving their problems, help them practice solving their own problems. And finally, be really intentional about balancing screen time with good old-fashioned outdoor play and face-to-face connection. After all of this, let's just zoom out for a second. The most important thing to remember is that the goal here isn't to engineer some kind of perfect child. It's about being a conscious, supportive guide. The real goal is to create an environment, a home, a classroom, where a child feels safe enough to explore, to fail, to learn, and to become the absolute best version of themselves. You don't have to do all of this at once. So looking back at everything we've talked about, just ask yourself, what is one small thing you can change or add to your child's blueprint today? Maybe it's just naming one emotion at dinner tonight, or spending 10 minutes playing a new game. That single, small step, that's where it all begins. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.